I am very pleased to welcome today our friend and ally and collaborator, Dounia Wone. She is from here representing Vestaire Collective, which has very generously sponsored this entire summer camp of Open Edu and helped us bring these really deep and thought-provoking courses to the public for free and accessible and also available to people around the world. So Dounia, please extend our deepest thanks and gratitude to Vestaire, your colleagues here. Yeah, we're really, really grateful that we were able to do a summer camp because that's—
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And I'm really excited that you're here today because we have a trifecta of thought leaders in the sustainability and sort of systemic design transformation space. We have Aja Barber, who gave our first class in the beginning of summer on the history of fast fashion. She also has a new book out, which covers the same topic and has inspired so many people around the world to rethink their entire relationship with clothing, including myself. So Aja, it's really an honor to have you here again. And it's just great that you come back every year.
Thanks for having me. And I just want to say also Liz and Céline are both featured in the book quite a bit. So.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to get mine. We have Liz Ricketts, who started this beautiful organization called the Or Is Present. And she gave a class recently on the history of resale markets. Actually, it was just last Friday. A super deep, inspiring class, with a lot of information that was hard. It was challenging to hear and digest and learn about. But she also invited a couple of really inspiring Ghanaian designers to join us. And that left us feeling a sense of purpose. And then, of course, my dear colleague and sister, Céline Semaan, who gave a class on the culture of disposability and really dug deep into the history of public relations and why and how we have been manipulated into associating certain emotions with certain objects. So yes, power trifecta here, and we're here with Dounia. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. At the end of every Open Edu class, we always run out of time. Our students around the world have so many really, really good questions, and we always feel bad that we can't get to them all. There's never enough time. So we promised, we dealt with that by promising this time around that we would have a special session just for Q&A. Before we get into that, I just want to recap a little bit of what we learned during this summer camp, so that those of us who are joining us today who did not have a chance to attend all 3 classes will at least have some familiarity with the conversation that we've had up until this point. So we'll pull up some slides. And yes, the end of camp is bittersweet. It's true. But the wonderful thing is that the class video recordings are available on the website, and you can go back and you can watch them over and over again until you're really, really familiar with the material. So let's get into it. Aja Barber's class, The History of Fast Fashion and How We Got Here Today. Aja took us through the sort of sequence of events and developments in history that led to fast fashion, and really emphasized that fast fashion is not the way that we used to do things. In fact, that we used to have a much deeper relationship with our clothing, that, we had tailors, we had clothing was really more of an investment. and fast fashion, then, this business model really changed our relationship to clothing by producing large quantities of very cheaply made goods, watering down trends from the fashion shows and turning them over quickly, making huge, shockingly, disgustingly large profits at the expense of people in the labor markets and also in this in ecosystems. And this slide, Aja, just so you know, we looked at this slide as a team over and over again. We were, this is the hard-hitting stuff that people know you for. Thanks for pulling these together. Just take a moment and absorb. I'm not going to read through them all, but 100 billion garments produced every year and 20% go unsold. And the average garment is only worn 7 times. Let's go to the next slide. And here is some of the ecological devastation caused by the global shopping addiction. Completely unsustainable. And if there is a key takeaway from the class, this is it. We cannot keep going at this rate. Aja, I really love that you give the hard truths. You're really challenging us to think deeply about our own inner workings, our own minds. We got to stop buying so much. We got to slow down. We can help drive the systemic change by, essentially killing the demand for fast fashion.
I would also say that I think because we're raised to believe that our identity as consumers, I think that people tend to almost get a little bit defensive, because I think in our culture, particularly if you're from a privileged country in the global South, being a consumer feels like it's part of your identity. It's actually not natural for us to consider ourselves as consumers before we are citizens, mothers, daughters, friends, that sort of thing. But that's an identity that's been sold to us. And so I think when we mention even the notion of doing things differently, there's a lot of defensiveness. And I think I went through that myself when I was kind of beginning to put all the pieces together. There was a part of me that thought, I'm going to really miss all of this. And I can tell you, I don't miss any of it.
Yeah, that's how brands refer to us as well as consumers. That is the market. Anyway, I think that, I'm sorry, can we just go back? Those 3 questions at the end are really useful prompts to disrupt the cycle of shopping addiction. So if anyone is, kind of thinking about how to change habits, it's really about disrupting those reflexes and asking yourself these questions. Then we had Celine's class, The Culture of Disposability. This was a really fascinating class because it really talked, even beyond fashion, it talked about just the mass manipulation of public relations and marketing, and really analyzing public relations and marketing as a political tool of control. And here we saw how the public relations industry actually manipulates people to replace their sense of self-worth and status with consumption. And they do this by associating objects with primal emotions like desire, a sense of well-being and belonging. And this is how the culture of disposability also began. And class aspiration. Oh, I love classpiration. That's cute. Class aspiration or class-spiration, maybe the emphasis should be on the ass part. But really, you know, that's also a myth, you know, this myth that like you are more elevated, that you have a higher position in society. You know, if things are disposable and easy, you should not have to do menial tasks. And of course, this is a mantra that is kind of at the core of all of Slow Factory's work. Systemic issues require systemic thinking. Céline says this to us all the time. And last Friday, as I mentioned, we had the History of Resale Markets class by Liz Ricketts. And this was such a valuable class, Liz. For me, it was revelatory because I think it kind of exposed the underbelly of resale. You know, resale has a very, it has a cachet in sustainability circles, right? Oh, we're reusing, we're having, you know, secondhand clothing and vintage and consignment. It's, you know, it's good for the planet. And Liz, you really encouraged us to think more deeply about the secondhand clothing sector, the secondhand clothing supply chain, and to really understand how it is the main source of clothing for much of the world, and also B, how incredibly harmful it is. You know, those photos that you showed us of the clothing washing up on the beaches in Ghana were really devastating. And the designer that you invited to your class, I can't remember if it was Bobby or if it was Daniel, but he mentioned something, he said something that really stuck with me, which is how the kind of flooding of Ghana with these secondhand clothing also really smothers the sort of creative opportunities for local designers. That really, really stuck with me. Yes, and this was another thing, you know, this is what I love, fashion as the lens, or fashion as a gateway to kind of look at these much, much bigger kind of geopolitical forces that we're contending with. And, you know, Liz's class started with fashion, but then began to really analyze things within a colonial and anti-colonial framework. So one of the key takeaways is, you know, that colonialism demands compliance. And yeah, this pretty much sums it up. Trash is trash. Some of the images that we saw during the class. So a true circular economy must be more than the preservation of material. A true circular economy reminds us of why we need each other. And I would love to sort of use this statement to jump into our Q&A. I see we already have quite a few in the Q&A box, but I do want to raise one question that came in that we saved for today. This idea of why we need each other and being aware of our interdependence, being aware of our connection to each other as humans and our connection to nature, really is at the heart of how we transform all of these systems. Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not realize that we have a few more slides. I'm sorry, Dounia.
No, it's fine.
Quietly smiling over there, like someone waved at me.
I'm following the flow, don't worry.
Yes. Okay. And so, Dounia, do you want to walk us through these
really quickly
informative slides that you compiled for us?
Yeah, really quickly, because my team asked me to present Vestaire, as we did not actually made a whole class, hopefully, on this topic. but I'm glad to see that we covered so much topic into this different courses you have. And I just wanted you to present quickly Vestaire. So here's a kind of a super number, but I'm not going through all of this, but just to give you an idea of who is Vestaire. Vestaire is the first European marketplace of pre-loved fashion. I don't want to say luxury because we are doing more than that now. It's an old slide, but being the first give us also a lot of responsibility. As you, Aja showed on the slide, we work in a, sorry for the word, crappy industry. But Vestaire is part of the solution. Let me just explain how and what I say by part of the solution, because this business was created 12 years ago on a circular business model by Sophie Hersan and Fanny Moisan, our co-founders. And yet, even if we do have a business that is more responsible, we are not free of impact. So that's why I arrived at Vestaire a year and a half ago. If you can go on the slide. So what are we doing to drive this change? So here I wanted to share with you our vision and mission. So I'll read it quickly. We transform the fashion industry for a more sustainable future by empowering the community of fashion activists to drive the change. This is not just our marketing tagline. It's what we believe in truly. Actually, we also put it into our bylaws recently to make the environmental and social issues into our mechanism of decision, of business decision. And also, and Aja can talk about this better than us, we continue, we repeat this mantra always and always to our consumer, but also into the company, that we want people to buy less and buy better, which is not just using resale as an overconsumption way of getting more clothes, but really change the way we consume fashion. And if you can go on the slide, how are we doing that? So this is part of the strategy, because we decided that sustainability, environmental and social issues has to be built as the business strategy. And we think through those 4 different pillars. So first, before seeing the others, being an exemplary company. So for instance, we are working to be soon B Corp certified, to give ourselves a chance to have a good governance, have the employees really respected all across the countries where we work. The second one is how we reduce our footprint. So I told you we are not free of impact, and one of the biggest impact at Vestaire is transportation, logistic, and then right behind digital, which will be a great topic for the next years to come on sustainability. And empowering our community, because it's not just about buying and selling clothes, it's also what we can bring toward our community. So the consumer, how we educate and raise awareness on certain topic, as we did, for instance, with these courses. And I'm glad now to see how Vestaire Collective Instagram has changed recently. For instance, we just don't have just fashion pictures, but also have concrete and free information for people to do the right choice. And also how we take us, we refound our platform and how we put different features for the consumer to choose the right, the more responsible behavior on our platform, buy more locally, choose direct shipping over a long trip from all across the world, And the last one, sorry, the first one is triggering the systemic change. And how we do that, we believe that we cannot change the way people consume fashion just by ourselves. So we are working with our allies. So Aja, Liz, and some other, a lot of other people who are the everyday hero on the topic, and also also with the organization, because there are people thinking about the future of fashion and how we can make it better. And then also the governments, because we will need them to make the change. So we're working with the UN Fashion Alliance, the World Economic Forum, but also with the French governments. And this part is really, I think, essential to really move the line. So that's Vestaire. This is kind of a recap that I will be happy to share with all of you.
Thank you, Dounia. And I'm so sorry I skipped ahead. It was really informative. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, and we'll again share the recording of this. So if anyone wants to take a closer look at some of those numbers and the transparency work that Vestaire is doing, they will be in the recording, and you can always screen grab and take a look at their exemplary practices. So I am debating whether we go into sort of more logistical and systemic issues, or the sort of sociological and psycho-emotional issues here that are all tangled in this. I think I'm going to really start with the self, because quite a few people have asked questions in this genre, which is, how can we make better decisions as both consumers and creatives? How do we, as one student put it, how can we start to disentangle our genuine desires and our self, and how we express ourself, from the person that we are sort of manipulated to aspire to be under capitalism and under all of this sort of marketing? And, if you want to even speak from personal experience, I think that would be really interesting for our students to hear.
The first thing I'll say is, it's not you, it's the world, and that's what you have to realize. Like, you didn't exactly grow up as a 4-year-old think, I want to buy a bunch of clothing that I'm going to hate when I'm an adult. Like, that's not how any 4-year-old starts. And so remember that all of this is systemic, and don't beat yourself up for it. But I think for me, once I began to really pull together the pieces of this puzzle that I read about, the first thing I just thought was, wow, I'm going to stop. Like, I'm going to stop going to the mall when I feel like I need to buy something, or I'm happy, or I'm going to meet up with a friend. I had to change the entire way that like I was brought up to sort of consume, basically. And it was actually wonderful. Like, at first you're kind of like, I'm bored. I miss these email nudges that are going to tell me to buy something that I don't actually need. And then you begin to be like, oh, my head actually feels a lot more clear. And then I'm like, I have more money to buy books. Like, before I wasn't buying as many books. Now, obviously now books are a bit of a problem for me, but that's okay, because I can always pass them on to a friend. But you just got to slow down. And I think what people don't recognize is that the tie between social media and all of these systems is really, really strong. And so if you want to change the ways in which you engage with these things, look at what you're surrounding yourself with in social media. And if you don't like that, change that first and foremost.
Thanks, Aja. I'll jump in and just say, for me, it was very similar. I basically stopped buying anything new for a year, and or made that decision. And committed to doing new things with my wardrobe, specifically, and started finding tailors and cobblers in my area, people that I didn't even know really were nearby. And that also opened up, a new relationship with the things that I had. And it also helped me to look at my closet and realize that the value that I placed on things had nothing to do with the price. First of all, I mean, I'm wearing right now, I'm wearing a shirt that was made of my friend's grandpa's socks. It was free. It was given to me. It's my favorite item that I own. And it costs nothing. And it's made of an old man's socks. So if that doesn't teach you to rethink what you find as luxury or what you define as quality, I don't know what does. So yeah, just looking at your closet, looking at the things that you have, really assessing what is it that you love and why, and letting yourself listen to that. I can't say it's see-through, Céline. You'll see it. I can't show you the whole thing. That would not be appropriate.
And again, I want to echo everyone. I feel like we've said this over and over again, that sustainability is a culture. I grew up with my mom altering the clothes as we were growing too big or too small for them, changing a top to a shirt. For her own wardrobe also, like she would make a very short skirt but leave a lot of it into the skirt, so that when it's no longer trendy, the short skirt, she would like extend it to a longer skirt. And she always kept these things in that way. Or she would get like a denim jacket and bedazzle it. Those were the 80s. But then when it was no longer fashionable, she would be able to remove them and change the style of it. And I grew up feeling like things aren't, made to be used and thrown, but more like creatively, what can we do? And the hardest part is not the adult consumption, I would say, because there are a million options for us as adults, but I really look at how children are underserved in a way in that space of fashion, because we are being sold really toxic materials for our children. Everything is flame retardant, which means it is dipped and bathed into so much chemicals that are being now studied and tied in research to a lot of neurodivergent diseases that are created after the fact that the children were wearing them. And so because of these funny rules that everything needs to be flame retardant TM, so they have a lot of criteria of what that means. Even an organic cotton with natural dyes, everything natural has to, if it's on the market, it has to go under certain criteria. So that's one. Second, I think that kids wear things till they're done, like till they tear. So the whole donation cycle is really misleading, because you're not going to donate that ever. Like no one gonna wear that. So what do we do with it? It has spandex, it has those chemicals that I mentioned, it has chemical dyes. And so I think that in the youth and children's segment, we kind of like don't really look at it in a way, because it goes so fast. It's really a fast-paced industry, and because they grow so fast and they destroy their clothes. And I have two children that I can tell you, like, we try so hard to patch, and to, once we have a stain, I bought these pens that you can draw on the fabric. So I have so many of these creations of ours that starts with a stain and it turns into a mural. But even then, like, what do I do with it once they grow out of it? So it's less of a I think of a individual action, or yes, we can alter the fact, yes, we can say we don't want this anymore, we don't want to buy this, we can mobilize, we can make noise. But it is, at the end of the day, from an industry standpoint, the responsibility lies on their hands. Like, why are we still engaging in these very toxic chemicals that are on the skins of our children? Like, is there any other way we can look at it? And I'm sure there are. So this is what I'd like to add.
I think, I mean, all three of you, kind of reminded us of the systemic nature of this problem. And I wanted to ask Dounia about something you said in your brief presentation about how you're working with the French government. This is a question that has popped up today and also left over from one of our past classes. what is the role of government? You know, how can we get legislators to create the kind of policy that we need? And how have you been working with the French government, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the consumer cannot just hold all the responsibility. So of course the brand, and Céline is right, the industry needs to change. And for the chemicals on our clothes, we started to look as consumer really into this topic on food, but not yet on what we wear. So I think now it's the time that we really look at our labels. But for to answer you on the government, I guess, and it was part of my job before joining Vestaire. So I guess there is three different things. First, they must educate and raise awareness on the topic. Then I think they need to regulate and put and set standards, clear standards that the brand will follow. And after that, and it's the last one, is when people are still not following the standard and still cheating, I'll say punish them. Yes, they have this power to make the decision and to make it for the citizen, but not just to put all the responsibility on the citizen and try to find new little designer that do everything good. So we'll say, oh, you can buy there, and keep the big fast fashion industry do whatever they want in all their countries. So with the governments, we're here in France, we are lucky because we had this anti-waste law. I don't know if you heard about that regulates a bit, but we need to go really further, because it's not just not burning the clothes that are unsold, it's also how before that we reduce the pace of the production and be more transparent on the label. So an environmental and social display should be at the consumer disposal, as we do on food, for instance. So I know that I will choose this cereal over another, something clear and simple, and then incentivize the brands or the designer that are already doing this shift and are working properly, so they make them growth, and at the same time punish the cheater.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think all of those things, you know, good legislation, monitoring, enforcement. And, you know, I think enforcement ideally would lead to fines, and those fines should then be reinvested into sustainability initiatives.
Yeah, and be really clear on what is sustainability for your business, because sustainability can be just a marketing tool for, I don't want to just drop some brands, but we all know that it's like nowadays a real good marketing levers, but sometimes it's not just true. So set a standard for people who follow the truly transformation.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a question here in the Q&A today that's interesting, you know, and I'm probably Liz would be a good person to speak on this. What is an alternative solution to the secondhand market in terms of how we deal with textile waste and things like buttons? I guess they're called like trims or something like that, you know, like, yeah. So what can be done so that those things are not wasted? You know, we already, even if we all change today, you know, and the whole world gets rid of its consumption addiction, we do still have a huge surplus of unused clothing. And what are some alternatives to deal with this waste?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the truth is that there isn't a solution for everything that exists currently, which is why the first step is slowing down production to extreme levels. Again, a minimum of 80%. I would go up to 95%, so that we can take the material that already exists and recirculate it through upcycling. And through that, we're automatically going to make use of the sort of notions and stripping, zippers, buttons, things like that. But in terms of practical advice, I would recommend that you think about, where are you donating and what does that mean for the community that you are a part of, and what community is that center accountable to. So basically, I would prefer that people donate as locally as possible. So find an organization in your local community that's working on a referral system where they're ensuring that the goods that you give them are going to be cleaned, are going to have the buttonry sewn on if necessary, and given to people who are actually requesting assistance. And then next step would be giving it to a charity that is at least redistributing and reinvesting some of that money into the community. And I think that the last step should be putting it in, a brand resale or brand take back bin, because they're ultimately not doing anything for the community that they're a part of. They're just sort of extracting all of that. And these are for the things that have no immediate resale value, right? Like these are the things that are difficult to know what to do with. I think that there are a lot of organizations that are focused on scaling fiber to fiber recycling. But again, if we don't look at the business model that exists, for instance, we have a bunch of fiber to fiber recyclers reaching out to us currently who want us to gather up all the waste in Ghana and export it to the global north so that they can recycle it and turn it into new clothes. And most of those fiber to fiber recycling companies, I think, are doing incredible things, but most of them are funded by brands, and the brands have an incentive to produce more clothes, not to replace current production levels, right? And so for us, when we're having these conversations, we're saying, if you're going to do that, it comes with certain conditions. And one of them is ensuring that profit will always go back at every single step of that supply chain of this new circular product. A percentage of the profit needs to be reinvested in a community like Consumanto where the waste was extracted from, because that's the only way that we can hold people accountable within the system and make sure that we are actually replacing new things with old things and not just adding a new, profit stream.
I have a question, Liz. How many have been like, yeah, that's fair? Or are they like,
So far, none. I would say we might have a good shot with 2 currently. It depends on what people have seen. So there's one fiber to fiber recycling company where one of the co-founders has spent time in Ghana, and she understands the problem. And so therefore she, understands why we're asking. But I think the reality is most of the people in this business don't understand their own supply chain, haven't seen it themselves. And so it's quite a bit, takes a lot of work to make the argument, but I am hopeful.
No, if we're really trying to create systemic change, we do need a lot of public pressure to do that. And one of the questions that came up in during summer camp edu, Open Edu, over and over again is, what is a skillful way to start this conversation with friends without putting them on the defensive? And Dounia, I want to actually invite you to address this question too, because I'm sure that once you even tell people what you do, does some kind of defensiveness arise almost immediately about people's habits? And, how do you kind of entice people into the conversation without making them feel ashamed or kind of shutting down in the conversation?
Yeah, well, I managed to have my kids better consumer than my own friends, and they are adults. So I guess first it's a personal journey. But when I do actually share what I'm doing for Vestaire, I try to show the good aspects of changing the way we consume. Aja talked about affordability before. So first one, economics. So you'll get more money to do other stuff, and just focus on the positive things and the fact that you're, or I guess when I changed the way I consume, I was happier because at the opposite of Céline, I did not grow up in this system. I grew up in the overconsumption system. And I do understand this is my parents' history coming from Africa to France and having those opportunities to consume. But maybe I just at some point wanted to do the complete opposite and see that I was really happier with fewer things in my home or just in my wardrobe. And I guess it's my own journey that I share with my friends so they get interested in. And also I told you, I'm glad that now Vestaire is doing more educational content. So now that they are following Vestaire, because I'm working at Vestaire, they will see some topic and they will say, oh, I start following one influencer. So Aja, it was you, but an influencer, she's super great, inspiring. I love it. Okay, maybe I'll try to find those a pair of jeans on Vestaire, and then they come and start consuming. And I guess it's just focus on the positive things. And when they ask about, for instance, my niece was talking about this super t-shirt with glitter and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, how much was it? And she said, oh, it was €2 and something else. And I was like, do you think that when you pay a t-shirt €2 in a shop, someone will get paid behind this t-shirt? Who? And then she was like, not ashamed, but thinking and saying, okay, this is a question she never asked herself. So I guess is finding a good way to talk to every one of our own ecosystem, smaller ecosystem, and then educate. But I'm glad that I have two sons and they never want to buy anything, so they can use their things until the very, very end, and they don't need anything.
That's amazing. Dounia, Aja, just 1 second. I wanted to just remark on something Dounia said and ask Céline about it, because you said something that I also relate to, which is when you come from an immigrant background, and your parents, they go to France, or in my case, they came from post-war Korea, where there was not much of anything. And then they came to the United States and they became like, so excited about like consuming things. And yeah, I wanted to just kind of check in with Céline about that as well, because you have a different experience where your parents still live in Lebanon, but they do come and visit you and spend time here. Do they get caught up in it, or do you feel like their sort of internalized culture of sustainability is so strong that they come here and they're like, wow, what is this?
Not at all. No, I mean, I lived through the 90s in Lebanon after the war ended, and we escaped the war during the 80s when as refugees, and my parents always had the idea, we'll go back, this is temporary. So when we went back, in 1995, in 1996-7, we started seeing McDonald's and H&M wanting to come, and first Zara, the shop came and opened up the doors. And I remember I was 16 and I was so excited, like, oh my gosh, I'm finally gonna wear something that's not hideous. Okay, because like, again, like it was not really wow, to have a culture of sustainability. It's like you're wearing your mom's skirt that is altered, and you're wearing like, her friends would go to Turkey and get a few things, and it would be a mishmash of things that I didn't really relate to. I only wanted to wear super simple things, and everything had like ling 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 on it, and you know, like whatever, something that's moving, and I'm like, no, I want something simple. And the aesthetic of simplicity is also colonial. Like I didn't even notice that that's what I was about. I wanted to be modern, I wanted to be simple anyway. So we went to Zara, etc. And slowly but surely, my mom started to work in fashion and started to import to Lebanon in the late 90s plus size clothes that she would go and find, because she, plus size, again, that's a term that we're using, but just like sizes above size 12, because that's where she was at, you know, in her life. And she realized like there was nothing cute for a woman who is curvy and a woman who isn't, you know, has a European body. So that's her business in Lebanon, okay? And they did that for over 10 years, more than that. And now, as you know, Lebanon is completely collapsing, and that is an issue we are facing. We have so much dead stock in Lebanon that isn't sold, and we are not looking to sell. It's sitting in an office, and that's a main issue for them now, being like understanding. I kept telling them, that's great that it's plus size, but it should also be done properly, and it should be done this way and that way. And it was always like, you and your standards, you know, let's do what we have to do here. But when they come here, they are fascinated by this ease, that things are accessible at the tips of your fingers, that, you know, the best thing they like to do is shopping. Like, I'm not gonna lie, they come here and they're like, let's go shopping, and I'm like, shopping? No. Why? What do you need? You know, you have everything you need. And it's this idea, again, I looked in my class, we talk about it. It's this idea of status, of ease and comfort that they're buying into. They get a rush from it. I could see it, and I was there also when I was younger, purchasing things that made you feel like uh, you are rich, you are comfortable, you are clean, you are, you know, part of the world, you know. And those are the things that immigrants buy into. I would say, like this idea of I'm respectable. And again, in our household, you know, everything was hand washed, and we smelled impeccable, and we always were wearing the a clean clothes. And this idea of buying secondhand, and yes, we bought secondhand, but more importantly, it had to look clean and new. And because our status was depending on it, you know, you go to school, you already picked on, you already have, you know, to prove yourself, and your parents know this, and they kind of build that shell for you, you know what I mean? But Aja, I would love to hear your thoughts, because I know you have always so many amazing things to add.
I was going to say something extremely basic, and after hearing that, it just sounds really ridiculous. So I think I might keep that to myself.
You know
because
what?
you just said something so deep and beautiful. And what I was going to say is, like, you know, even if you don't get into all of the issues behind, I was going to tag on to what Dounia said about affordability. Like, even if you don't get into all the issues behind all of this stuff, because obviously it can be like dropping someone who doesn't know how to swim into the deep end. You might freak them out a little bit. The easiest thing to go for is you can afford some really nice things for not a lot of money. And people will be like, really? You know, I'll get people sharing an item on Twitter and we'll say like, oh yes, I really like this designer pair of boots. And I'm like, you know, those are going to be on Vestaire Collective, like probably right now in the summer, because sometimes people will sell things in the summer. Have you thought about looking there? So even if you're not ready to like really be like, let's dive into how the system is harming a lot of people, if you want to go for the surface thing, next time your friend is like, there's a item by like a higher end designer that they can't normally afford, you can just be like, have you tried secondhand? But that's obviously coming off of the back of what Céline said. It sounds quite shallow, but
it's pretty efficient.
I
But
don't
It's pretty efficient.
my experience also was kind of, it's weird because I wasn't an immigrant, but I was a Black child in a very affluent white area. And I think I first got into fast fashion because I never felt enough. I never felt accepted. I didn't have the right clothing. My mother grew up in a very economically depressed situation. And so like my mom has always thought very, very frugal. We were wearing secondhand clothing my entire life. And hand-me-downs, and that got me made fun of. So the first time I visited one of the big high street stores was actually over here. And I remember like my brain short-circuiting and being like, yes, this is for me. And then I remember those stores coming to the US and being like, yes, like it was such a, I don't know, it was such a this weird need to consume these products that I never even stopped to really examine or investigate. And the minute I took a breath to really investigate what has pushed me into this system where I am buying monthly, sometimes weekly, I realized I didn't like any of it at all, and how had I been doing this for so long. But I had also always been someone who would shop secondhand through Vestaire and other places as well. So there was a part of me that sort of cobbled together what is my platform today through thinking about all of these things very slowly over a matter of years, basically.
You know what, Aja, I don't think that's ridiculous at all. I think that's called skillful means. I mean, you are talking about meeting people where they are. And if price point is, you know, a concern, great. It's like fishing, you know, you put the worm that you like, and then exactly, and then you kind of reel them into the other topics related to this entire industry. You know, like the chat is kind of blowing up right now because people are talking about that rush that you said your brain short-circuited and you got a rush, and someone was talking about, you know, it's dopamine, I guess, you know,
It is dopamine.
Neurotransmitters. And someone asked such an interesting question in the Q&A, which is, should there be, or maybe is there already, some equivalent of like Alcoholics Anonymous for shopaholics? You know, does something like that exist? And if not, should we have something like this?
I was thinking about that as I was writing the book. I was thinking I would love to form like some sort of group where we talk about, you know, what compels us to buy. And like, I didn't buy this dress today, even though I really wanted to. I was feeling really bad about myself, whatever, because as you saw on my slide, I think it's 18 million Americans suffer from a shopping addiction. So this is clearly something in our society that is not being addressed. And that's just the stats for America. I don't know the stats for the UK and other countries, but I guarantee you it's there if you look for it. And so, yes, I think just unpicking these systems, I think, is super necessary. And that's something that we as a society are kind of reluctant to do because the system pays a lot of people. There's a lot of industries that run off of the system of endless consumerism and endless consumption. And it's such a heavy part of our culture that I do think that there's a reluctance to pick it apart.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in fact, one of the questions carried over from the earlier sessions is, you know, if we talk about picking apart the system and we pressure our lawmakers and we get better policies and we put pressure on businesses, what will happen? There are large numbers of mostly women, you know, in the global South who are employed in, you know, it's not a living wage, but still they are employed and they're earning something. So what will happen? You know, and what is the sort of plan for if we sort of, what does the off ramp look like, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't, you know, like, we don't want what happened during the pandemic where everyone canceled their orders. Céline, raising your hand, I love it.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm raising my hand for two things. So last year, I conducted a survey asking shopping while sad. There was this meme that was circulating that the therapist is like, and what do you do when you're sad? And the person says shopping, and the therapist is like, no. So I posted that and I said, do you shop while sad? And I think it was like 98% of people. And I had the survey up on my stories where thousands of people saw it and answered. 98% said, yes, I'm shopping while I'm sad often. And then I wrote a piece about it, and you know, just looking into these things that this illusion that makes us feel like we're doing something that's therapy. It was sold to us as therapy, when in fact it's not therapy at all. The therapy is long-term. This is just a short rush of adrenaline or dopamine, and then we're back into this addiction. And just to answer your question, I was also giving a workshop a few summers ago when before COVID, we used to go and do workshops in person. And I was working with youth between the age of 13 and 17 at the Cooper Hewitt. They have a big program every summer of free education. And I used to teach there. And one of the classes they wanted me to do was fashion activism, because as a class. And because these kids, you know, they buy the Kith, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, or Supreme or whatever. They buy expensive like streetwear, and they buy a lot. You know, children really are into consumption from a young age to fit in, to be relevant. And as I was telling them, you know, fast fashion and so on and so forth. First of all, everyone had a Burger King or a McDonald's something on their desk, or Dunkin' Donuts. So already I was like, I'm not in good hands, because they're already like in the idea of consumption. So we started talking about how McDonald's, Dunkin' Donut is not so good for your health, and so on and so forth. And just, you know, being aware of that. And the other thing was, okay, fast fashion, where do you shop and why do you shop? And so, and the kids were like, well, if I don't shop, the person in Bangladesh is not gonna eat. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's such an interesting statement, you know? And so, as you said, Janan, this is definitely another myth that, yes, it's true, they are being paid, but they're not even being paid a living wage. They are being paid under a living wage, and they are being humiliated from, let's say it this way, you know, it's a humiliation to be a part of this system. There is no other option. So I'm not saying, okay, if they, and it was so complex to talk about it with kids, because they're like, well, what's going to happen if I don't go to H&M and buy from H&M? What's going to happen to her? I mean, and then anyway, I don't have an answer, but it was a long conversation. Go ahead, Adam.
I want to say that I think in these conversations, we do sometimes forget that there are brands that produce in the same countries that some of these big brands produce in, and they're not exploiting people. And there are designers, because we live in a colonialist society that only lifts up designers in North America and Europe and a handful in Asia. We don't actually think about the idea that there's actually like awesome fashion designers in Bangladesh, in India, all over Africa, Kenya, Ghana, etc. And so I think really flipping the script and changing the narrative, we have to get out of this idea that these companies that are the big ones are the only ones that can actually produce clothing that we can wear and buy and love and cherish. And getting to understand that, you know what, actually, I would like to support a designer in India. That designer in India getting my money means that more people in India are being employed and treated fairly by them. As that happens and that company grows, hopefully they will continue to do the right thing and to challenge the narrative that it's only that big brand over there that can produce in this area. And so basically the summary of my book is, if you do anything at all, slow down and spread your money around. So yeah, I think that's the answer I give people, is that you don't have to give your money to that person. If you really want to support someone in that part of the world, find a designer in that part of the world and support them. And we're lucky we have the internet, you know, obviously for young kids, there's some accessibility there, but for like adults, you know, you're buying most of your stuff online anyways. Why not take a minute?
They are on the internet. They are making the TikToks that I don't understand.
Okay, but they don't have credit cards.
I just wanted to add to that I think too, you know, basically it comes down to this fact that we've accepted that human rights are reliant on having a job. And I mean, people have jobs right now and their human rights aren't protected. So yeah, I don't really believe that slowing down, again, it's also, if we slow down consumption of new, there's plenty that already exists that we can, you know, create jobs upcycling and renewing.
Yeah, you know, so much of what we've talked about, we really focused on fast fashion and the destruction that this industry brings all over the world. But someone asked a really valuable question, which is, what about luxury brands? You know, do you know if there are luxury brands? We have this illusion that because luxury brands are so expensive that they're not exploiting and they're not polluting. But yeah, do you have any insight about whether luxury brands are doing the same thing? Because, you know, people will go crazy to get the latest luxury sneaker, and then it has also a lot of value, of course, on the resale market as well. Dounia, you look like you definitely know something about this.
I don't know if I know, but I can tell you that the price is not a guarantee of having good quality, good condition of an item. So what do we need, and what we are working on with brands is transparency, and know what it is, what the material they choose, how they pay how they pay the one who are making those clothes. So I guess it's transparency that will help us at some point to do the right choice, because it's without the information, as a consumer, we cannot. And as a reseller, we are dying to share with our consumer, okay, you can choose this t-shirt from Prada or this t-shirt from Chanel, but today I cannot tell them which one is the best in terms of impact. And I'm not just talking about the environmental impact on the planet, but also the social impact. So the transparency, it's on the both topics. So I guess luxury is often a better quality because they need to put better quality on those items because of the price, but doesn't mean that they are the best, and doesn't mean that we cannot do more, and doesn't mean that we are not sharing this information with the consumer. I think it's mandatory to go there.
Thank you for that. Anything to add? Luxury versus fast fashion?
At the end of the day, I guess I read that it's only less than 1% of the item, that luxury item, that end in a landfill. And actually, we had a great conversation with Vicop about that, because we were trying to say that we are trying to tackle an issue. But obviously, yes, the luxury item doesn't end up in the landfill, but still there is a problem of overconsumption. There is a problem of accessibility, affordability of those items, and better quality is not, it's like the organic food back in the days. I guess if you're asking, I'm a single mom, if you're asking me before, when I was younger and I had less money, do you want to give organic food to your kids? I would have said yes, but I cannot afford it. And how do you give better quality at a lower price, at a reasonable price, where everyone can, like, I think we can find a way to make justice, like social justice and environmental justice for the planet, and keep having clothes. We are not talking about something delusional, I guess, but it's just how we try to not do a big monopoly of big brands, either in fashion industry or luxury industry, but how we localize more and more and work with people into smaller ecosystem, and not just looking through the money and how big we can be on a global scale, because I guess we need to change the scale at some point, but it's what we trying to do, but we are not there.
I have a question for Dounia. In France, did they recently pass laws to make it harder for luxury brands to like destroy merchandise, or did I imagine that?
No. It's the anti-waste
There was a question
flow.
about that. Yeah,
Yes.
There's a question about that in the chat. So I just wanted
it.
to, it's okay, I'm just reading the chat. But yeah, I wanted to say, this obviously isn't a law that's universal, but in France, they have passed anti-waste laws to keep luxury brands from burning and incinerating their goods. And that needs to really go everywhere.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hope that other countries will do the same. Dounia, you said something too that resonates with me so much, which is the idea of small, and the idea that, you know, I think the kind of, if we want to call it sustainability 1.0, like the first wave sustainability advocates, they were so obsessed with like scaling up sustainable solutions. How do we scale this, right? And I feel like now the conversation is beginning to change, and maybe we're seeing a little bit of like a sustainability 2.0, where, you know, chefs and people in the fashion space and, you know, a lot of different sectors are really talking about how sustainability means small, sustainability, scaling down, slowing down, making the supply chain a lot more, a lot shorter supply chains and smaller networks, and really in a way, you know, degrowth or evolving. It's evolving, but it's degrowth to evolve, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to kind of amplify what you said about small.
Right.
Small is beautiful. It allows more depth.
Yes, we can evolve in smaller scale, in harmony with our ecosystem, our country, our city, and still.
Small is Beautiful is a book. I love that book.
Yes. And also deeper, I think small also allows us to have deeper relationships. If, like, for example, if you shop at your local farmer's market and it is from your, if the produce is from your region, that's a perfect example of a very small and short supply chain. And you're talking to people who work on the farm, and you are in relationship with people who work on the farm. So you're only 2 steps removed from the land where the food was grown, instead of, you know, 50,000 or 200,000 miles away. And I think even just our conversation today, right? Having a deep conversation on Zoom, you know, we are not like DJ D Nice with 4 million people on Instagram Live. We are here with, you know, 100 or so or 200 or so hardcore sustainability nerds who are asking really complicated questions and like looking at their own lives, and also really trying to work out how they can influence people around them. And to me, that's also the power of small. You know, it's depth, it's slower communities, smaller, yeah, just kind of a smaller and tighter focus. So, you know, if there's a takeaway for me today, that's it. I really want to hold on to this idea of how beautiful small can be. We went way over time. It's almost 1:50.
Yeah, I was gonna say time check. There's still so many questions. So I hope that the team at the Slow Factory team can record these questions on the Q&A so that we are able to answer them eventually. This is, as Janwan said, like such a deep conversation, and it's great. You know, we are a smaller group. We are able to dive deeper. I see some of the question in the Q&A that if we aren't able to give you an answer, I think these are great projects to start on your own. For example, one question is regarding documenting the secondhand market in your local community. I think that's an incredible project to start. I don't think Slow Factory has the capacity, or Aja or Liz, to, you know, have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. We are in this space because we are curious, and that's what Open Edu is about: is to ignite the curiosity, to validate it, to give it a space. And to encourage others to really join in on these important questions and helping us find the answers together. So that's what I wanted to say about the Q&A. Ask us anything.
Yeah, and also I guess to really what we're here to do is to encourage critical thinking, and we're here to also encourage kind of systemic thinking. And there is no one solution to fit you know, the problem in every region. So it's really just more of like a way of thinking about things, and then bringing those critiques and analyses and imagination to your own local context, and kind of decentralizing the solutions as well. And I just want to take a moment to say that part of that is to stay engaged in conversation. We have a Slack. We're really hoping to grow the conversation and kind of evolve it away from like comments in Instagram, where you can't really share links, you can't share resources. It's hard to have a conversation in the comment section. And the comment section can be a scary place sometimes. So we really encourage people to go to our Slack. We have an Open Edu Slack. We have a small and mighty growing community there, something like 3,000 strong now. And you can find like-minded people and share things that are working in your part of the world, and see what other people are doing in other parts of the world. It's an antidote to despair, to kind of know that there are people like you who care about the same things and who are taking action in other places. So please go to our Slack and keep the conversation going there. Hopefully one of our colleagues will drop the link to join our Slack in the Zoom chat. And as usual, even though we dedicated a whole session to Q&A, we ran out of time. We didn't get to the questions. So sorry, but you know, each of our guests have, and of course, Céline, my colleague, have so much to say on the topic. Dounia, maybe we can just have you back again, because I think you brought a really valuable perspective from the point of view of creating a new system to challenge the old system, right? And it's adjacent to the industry, and providing people with a real alternative that I think is quite valuable. And I love the transparency aspect of what you're doing, and really pushing even the brands that you carry to go further in that. I wish you a lot of luck with that. I would love to see that like nutrition label on a clothing label. That would be.
We're working on it. I hope we'll get there.
Yes.
We're testing with brands. That's how we choose to use our little power in this industry. So thank you for this conversation. It was super interesting.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. And thanks to our students for, you know, just keeping our chat popping and exciting and just on fire all the time. You know, we can't see you, but we can feel you. So thank you so much for, you know, co-creating this community with us. And Aja, Liz, thank you so much.
Aja, you want to say something? I felt like you
No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me, but I didn't want to like chime in. I love these chats. I'm always like in the chat and here. I just
You're
love
super
it.
strong on the chat. You can follow the chat and,
So good
and
on the
talk.
chat.
It's because I do Instagram lives constantly. And so you
I
have to be
know.
able to read everything really quickly and respond to it. So yeah.
Thank you
This
so
is really beautiful. Thank you all.
And thank you, Jenny. And
thank you, Jenny and Veronica.
Veronica, so much. Really appreciate you. Bye, everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.